Tens of thousands of football fans came to Highbury. Electrifying!
Yes, guys, welcome back to the Cannon podcast. Hello, everyone. How are you? Hope you're doing very, very well. Happy Monday. I'm here with a full house to discuss another fun-filled weekend of Premier League action involving Arsenal Football Club, the thing we all love and enjoy. Right, guys? Right?
To be fair, this is probably one thing that you have to do to get us all on the pod at one point. We have to lose.
We have to lose. I don't think we've ever discussed a victory, have we? We didn't even lose, we drew. That's an indictment of this season. Yes, we are here. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for watching us. If you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you subscribe. Make sure you like the video. If you listen to us on Spotify and Apple, leave us a little rating for the Cannon podcast. Arsenal may be faltering, but we are not. We're here with content for you every single week, loads of stuff, so make sure you check it out. Just quickly, a bit of housekeeping before we get going. I've YouTube members, if you're listening to this, I've realised some of you are not aware that we post stuff on the community page. So if you're ever looking for the scouted episodes and stuff like that, because we can't post them directly onto YouTube, we have to post them onto the community page. So some people will be going, oh, that's where the scouted are. So apologies if you missed that. That's where they are going. Okay, let's get to it. We want to take a measured approach to this. We want to talk about the game, obviously. We want to talk about probably the Saliba injury and injuries more widely, because we love talking about injuries, don't we all? We, of course, want to come to your questions. We'll come to expectations and loads of stuff. Rohan, I'll start with you. You've watched it back, you brave man.
I was there as well.
Andy was there. How was it? How was the experience?
I felt it was really flat. I don't know, well, for the viewers listening, don't know who obviously went, but for me, I didn't really enjoy the atmosphere. I felt it was really flat, and I have a feeling with what happened in the Liverpool game prior and the manner of their win with the 2 late goals from Darwin Núñez, I feel like that might have had an impact on the atmosphere. And it kind of goes back to, I remember the 22-23 season when like Man City had a big win and we'd be playing just after them. The atmosphere felt quite flat. So yeah, I wasn't my most enjoyable game for sure. Yeah. However, I watched it back and I might sit in a minority camp, but there's a lot of positives. There are a lot of positives. And I will obviously get into it more, but I do feel a lot better coming out of that game, especially after rewatching it. So
yeah. I have to say, and maybe this is probably where I need to start with a bit of a confessional. I think anyone who saw the instant reaction will probably know how I felt post game. And honestly, like, sorry to set the pod off on this foot, but I have to be honest. I think Saturday was the gut punch of all gut punches for me. I think the way that game played out, who it was against, in the context, as you were talking about, Rohan, with what happened with Liverpool, it's not over, and I will continue to say it's never. You know, we kept saying until we get to March, April, we can't call it. But I suppose my feeling this season is this, and George, you can talk me out the hole here. I think sometimes in life, you're in a situation and you're just like, I want this to work, but I just feel there's an inevitability to this. And whether it's a relationship or a job or, you know, a friendship or whatever it might be, you're trying and trying and trying and trying. And it feels like the harder you try, the more the universe is saying, this isn't going to happen for you, go on another path. And I'm sorry to come off on this kind of doomer starting point. And look, I could be convinced, but yesterday really felt to me like the universe telling us that this just isn't our season. And I'm watching not a bad game. I'm really not watching a bad game. I'm not watching Arsenal play poorly. I'm seeing one of our best offensive performances of the season. I'm seeing a masterclass from Gabriel. I'm seeing a masterclass from Rice. I'm seeing a young player come through. I'm not blind to all those positivities, but I suppose my frustration and kind of where I am, and I have to be honest, and you guys can help me with this, but I just feel like this isn't our year. That was just really my takeaway from that game. I came out of it going, I don't know what more we need to do for the tide to turn and for this to feel like our year. Could it be our year still? Of course it could. We're still in various competitions. We're only 6 points behind Liverpool, etc., etc. But it just, when that Saliba news came out, in the same way that when that Wanyeri news came out after Brighton, it just feels like this isn't our year. And from there, I find it hard to know where to move.
I think we need to segment some things. So we'll have a Saliba section. We'll have an injury section. So we'll talk to the contributing factor. But the I think the disappointment and the gut punch feeling that you're feeling is mixed with a lot of people at different points expecting a prize. At the end of this journey, there was this whole idea of committing to a process, committing to a patience, and committing to this idea that it will look worse before it gets better. And right now it's looking worse and worse and worse. And you're getting to the point where, should we be feeling this way 5 years after this point? Should we be feeling this way this far down into a process that we feel we should have got success with? We look at this team, they're not a bad team. They are objectively a great team. But what separates ultimately people's feelings around this are, okay, you can be great, but ultimately it doesn't matter unless at the end of the day I've got something to go and laugh about with my rivals and say, see, I did it. My process and us doing it the right way meant something more. And I think grappling with that slow realization about, are we any better 5 years on, even though I believe that there are a lot of significant metrics and real objective analysis that say yes, there is that nagging feeling behind everybody's minds ultimately of, so what? Where's the title? And that's something that we knew would be grappled along quite a bit this season. But the reason I keep returning to it is because no matter what, in terms of however much context you will apply to what is objectively a very good game, and we will get into the specifics, none of that matters because you feel it's over. And that apathy is what, for me, is contributing to a lot of the, is it worth it? I don't want to talk Arsenal. I don't want to do this, because I'm looking at, should we admit that 5 months later that it's already over? Should we be saying that so prematurely when we're talking about May? Should we be saying those things? And you're being painted as delusional if you think you are, which I don't think it's right, personally. There's maybe a whole conversation about who's logical and who's right and how you should feel and how nobody should tell anybody how to feel. But if I'm trying to bottle this frustration, this apathy, and this reaction to the flatness of, whether you're talking about atmosphere, the flatness talking about Arsenal, I have to be honest, I think it's because of that context. It's because of that context that no matter how much you may believe in the man, the players, and how much he's changed us for the good, at some point that has to result in success. Otherwise, you have to look at yourself and say, can we do something else to achieve that success? And that push and pull is what I believe is causing a lot of internal struggle.
For sure, it's the so what. It's, we are three very, I hope, at least interested fans and fairly positive fans, and fans who try and see the game as clearly as we can and understand things and learn things. And we've been on this amazing journey, in these 5 years with Arteta, obviously, and he's done so much for the club. But you're bang on. It's like, until we get that so what answer, it's going to be so what on days like this. And yeah, I suppose, again, there will be people listening to this going, Rohan, come on, Alex, mate, it's not over. Look at we're 6 points behind. Look how well we're playing. Look at it, all that stuff. I'm not denying that. I'm only speaking from a personal perspective, which is, I feel like we're just being given sign after sign after sign after sign that this isn't our season. And, at some point you have to kind of reckon with that a little bit and go, okay, well, there's things that we can do. Absolutely. But what does that mean if it isn't our season? What does it mean if this is another year where we don't win something? We have to look at that in the eye. We can't, people probably accuse, so you get as many people calling you top gooners and delusional as saying you're doomers, right? So you're probably doing something right. You're about in the middle. But I try and be honest, at least, and that's how I feel. Yeah,
it kind of goes back to whether you think, though, that this season is make or break for Arsenal, and whether you think this season is it, and there is always the talk about football goes in cycles, and it does. Teams have their ups and their downs, and sometimes when you don't capitalise on your ups, people argue that, the downs are soon to come. Despite looking at the context, despite looking at the metrics and the sustainability, I think that's where the frustration comes for a lot of people. And it's kind of like, I think the fear of also playing so well, season in, season out, but not getting that prize. And the fear of, in a few years' time, and let's say, hypothetically speaking, Arsenal don't win that major honour, it's going to be looked upon a little bit Spursy. which I don't see that happening. I maintain that the game model, and I maintain what we do under Mikel. I look back at our last 2 seasons and I don't believe, in fact, I'm adamant that the game model is not the reason why we didn't win the league. You know, it's down to different things. It's down to the Saliba and Tomiyasu injuries in the 22-23 season. And then last season, there are things we could have done better in December where we had that cluster, but it's not the criticism of the game model in general. The game model can improve in certain aspects, as we've all said many times, but I'm a firm believer that this is the way to go. And I do get it, because like after the game yesterday, I've not left the stadium as quick as that before, because it's not a frustration on the players. It's a frustration that I can see these players giving absolutely everything, and those finer details just don't seem to go their way. Like I remember the Chelsea game, right? Remember that move at the end, right? That starts from Saliba. Would have been one of the best moves of the entire season, you know, playing through pressure, and then Havertz, or I think it's Trossard, diverts it away from Havertz for a tap-in. The Fulham game, you know, Martinelli, millimetres offside, you know, the difference there. The disallowed goal against Liverpool, the disallowed goal yesterday. It feels
disallowed
like
goal against Fulham.
Yeah, and it feels like these players are giving everything, and it's just not going their way.
There was a point yesterday where the camera cut to Mikel, and I tweeted this. I was like, and this isn't a joke. I'm not trying to be funny here. This isn't a wisecrack. He looks like he's going to cry. And like I fully hear that from his perspective, and I hear that from the player's perspective. And what you said there is absolutely bang on. I feel like I'm at the point in the relationship where I'll do a George analogy. I've bought the flowers. I've taken her out for dinner. I've bought her some nice clothes. I've been to the gym for a couple of months. I'm looking good. I'm feeling good. I'm taking a holiday next week. We've had the emotional conversations, and she's still not happy. And you're like, at some point, you're like, well, is something telling me that I'm doing something wrong? And this is that, to put that into football terms, George. Like, I feel like we're doing everything right, and my belief in this process has been, if you keep doing everything right. I came up with this thing last night, and I'm not sure if it's true. It feels like we're applying a high-scoring sport methodology to a low-scoring sport. And let me just try and unpack that. If I have believed in this methodology of, if you are across everything, if you are across the field tilt, the metrics, the numbers, the line height, the final third entry, if you're across all of that, which we are, you're going to put yourself in enough positions in the end to go and win something consistently. That's what I believed in. Is that a high-scoring sport idea? Because in a low-scoring sport, do you need to come on to other things? And this is kind of my question, and there's that one, but sort of more of a meta one is, we're doing everything right, I feel, and if it's not coming, it's not coming, it's not coming, it's not coming, at what point do you turn around and say, let's try something different? And I'm not suggesting the manager changes, I'm saying the manager himself does something different.
I think that depends on what kind of person you are, ultimately. I mean, every conversation that I've had, for example, a lot of people will point to Liverpool, and one of my biggest arguments is that since Manchester City that they have played, which I believe, guys, quote me if I'm wrong, I think it was November, is when Liverpool faced Manchester City. Do you know that since that point till now, that they are on a 70-point pace? That is objectively bad. Period. Like, let's talk about Liverpool, because I think everyone thinks it's biased, and I'm coming from an emotional sense to Arsenal. And then I was having conversations with people, but saying, well, they went 11-1-1 at the beginning of the season. They have the right to be whatever they are. And I'm saying, okay, hold on, though. You didn't have that same logic when Arsenal were competing in 22-23, and they went completely unbeaten, achieving almost a 50-point pace beyond the 12 games. You told me it doesn't matter how well you play in a period in the season, you ultimately need the title. And it was ultimately poor because we were overachieving, and the wheels came off as they should have. That's what I was told. You were just overperforming. But people don't want to apply that logic to Liverpool. And they're saying, well, personally, there's this one comment that, Jamie Carragher made on Sky Sports that talks about a certain calmness about achieving a title. And I thought, my God, he is spot on with the fan base and completely wrong with the team. Completely wrong with the team. He's just described the fan base to a T. Because our fan base For as much as people want to quote having quoted the good times, I don't think those same people that saw the good times have experienced good times in so long that they remember what it feels like. Because for as much as there's heartbreak right now, this isn't 2013. And people are saying it is. And I think you're conflating disappointment at not reaching expectations from a team being bad or good. And we're looking at this from a perspective of, what's long-term success? I mean, Alex, you're talking about, should we be looking at a low-scoring sport? Okay, we did with Unai Emery and Aubameyang in terms of what we recruited. And guess what? Along the way, we achieved top four. We did some things, but where did that process ultimately lead you? With that mentality, and I'm not saying you're saying to become that, but what I'm saying is by recruiting the top 30 goal scorer, by recruiting the quick fix, how did people feel watching that football? And personally, I think people forget we may have been winning, but everybody said this is unsustainable. Everybody felt that whilst the results were occurring, that football didn't make us feel good. We didn't feel like competing, but the results had us competing. So now, how do we as fans rationalize doing that, whereas here we feel good about our football, but the results aren't resulting? And I think that comes down to who you are as a person in terms of, I don't want to get ageist, but in life, I believe you do the right things will come to you.
Yeah. Depends on how patient you are, isn't it? That's what it boils down to. Like, if you are of the opinion, like I said, we need to win it this season, that otherwise it's over, then you're going to have very emotional takes when Arsenal drop points, especially in moments where Liverpool win their games as well, like we saw on Saturday. And it feels like another sucker punch to you, and it feels like we're not going to be able to do it again. But I don't sit in that camp, and I know both of you don't either. And that's why, as frustrated as I can get on match day when we don't win the game, I always look at the perspective and always think that this team and everything that I see, watching every single Arsenal game back twice, I back it. I really do. And I am of that opinion. I have that Mikel Arteta mindset in this aspect of law of averages. If we keep playing this way, the good times will come. And we've seen that last season. We saw it the season before, So it's...
Look, that's generally where I sit too. But I would be lying if I didn't say there was a creeping doubt in my mind that that methodology works. Because I've believed in it for the last 5 years, and I'm going to continue to believe in it. But I'm also, there's a part of me going, okay, I'm just going to see if we can go, as George was kind of referring to, one step back to the Unai and Aubameyang times where there was a bit more on the edge of things. It doesn't mean you have to go all the way, but I mean, that's, for me, I think there's at least a question mark there for me now. And I think I'm open to that conversation, I think is what I'm saying.
But would you say your question marks... My question marks, I would understand that when we're talking about cup performances. Mm-hmm. I completely get that. But the league, I don't have big question marks over this team. Like we said many times, the things that we can do better. But I stand by Arsenal and what they have done in the league over the past 2 seasons. Yes, they haven't got that prize, but I don't believe it is down on the methodology. The methodology, I think, can be questioned in the cups. I think it can.
But it's not on or off, as in it is the methodology or it isn't. I think the methodology can be 99% right and 1% wrong. And I'm trying to find out what that 1% wrong is, because ultimately that's something's holding us back. And that's what I'm saying. There is something in this that isn't quite working.
Okay, so with all this, because I think this is a good segue into the game, because we could talk philosophy till the cows come home. But we're talking about drivers here. Who's in charge of the wheel? And where can we get blame? Because if we can fix it by a pill, by a magic Band-Aid, we believe it will bring us success. And I'm wondering, okay, if I was to tell you, Alex, or you, Rohan, I'm going to give you the amount of injuries that we've sustained this season in terms of the people out, the time out, and key players. I'd urge every fan to please answer me honestly. Do you believe that we can win the title knowing that was ahead of you this season, regardless of what you do well? Yeah. Personally, I think you're lying if you said yes. Now, that doesn't mean what we did with our outcome was perfect. There are things that I question, because where I'm at with this, I still believe Mikel Arteta, and I've said this before, on the blame scale, quote unquote, has made double the amount of coaching errors that I saw last season personally. Throughout the season, I believe that he's had a worse coaching season than he did last season. But I do not believe that injuries are near as likely the same. I actually purport we have never seen an injury crisis like this at Arsenal, period, since his time here. And the fact that this team is competing with this amount of injuries actually tells me more for the likelihood of titles than it does other things. Because I've seen this team collapse and collapse significantly up until that point. And I'm looking at it, and I feel that no matter how I want to spin this, good or bad, in a couple weeks, if we're talking Ethan Nwaneri's back, Ben White's back, Tom Yasu's back, Calafiori's back, and I give you a game with those players back alone, and we do nothing, and we win 5 to 6 games on the bounce, and I asked future Alex in 5 to 6 games, or future Rohan, or future George, how do you feel with results going your way, with the same people back, and with good performances? I'm willing to bet my left nut that you would say it's been great and that things are going well. And I might argue that the difference between Liverpool and Arsenal may not be 6 points, it may be 3 points with the game in hand. And then things change, and then your context change. Part of the problem is we have always felt as though we are trying to fix something that we feel is getting away from us, and that's causing a lot of issues and a lot of strife.
I hope I feel as positive as that in a few weeks, George. The only thing I'd push back on is on the injury thing. Because, for example, I look back to that Newcastle game, and I'm just looking at the lineup now. That lineup was Raya, Timber, Lewis Skelly with Calafiori on the bench, so they could have selected Calafiori, Saliba, Gabriel, Ødegaard, Rice, Thomas Partey, Kai Havertz, Martinelli, and Trossard. I think everyone, barring Saka, could say that's an 11. That's an 11, barring Saka. So you put in Saka for Trossard, it's Saka, Martinelli, Havertz, the midfield, and the defence. I think the issue for me with the injuries thing is, and this is more of a separate point, I'm not necessarily disagreeing with you, I think it's just a different interpretation. I think it's the inconsistency. I think that's the main frustration for me this season, and which is why I feel so, I guess, deflated about the kind of the methodology aspects of things. There was something that came out from Jordan Campbell, which was basically a massive spreadsheet, and I've retweeted it on my account at AM on Football if you want to check that out, but it's also on his account from The Athletic, and it's basically looking at all of the positions across the team and then who's been selected in each one, and it's green for where there's been a consistency of selection and orange where there's been changes, and it's pretty much, especially in the forward areas, almost always orange. We've had a massive lack of inconsistency, and that was kind of the same. Yes, not yesterday. Sorry, on Saturday up against Villa. Let's kind of talk about that. It was we've spent a little bit maybe on the down, but Rohan, it was quite an encouraging attacking performance. I think, especially on the left hand side, I thought the running was really nice from Marino and Havertz to create that space for Timber and Lewis Skelly inside. And I thought had the game gone different, I think we would have seen maybe more fruit down that side. I think it was one of Trossard's best games for Arsenal in a long time. We managed to fashion some good opportunities, I felt. But yeah, it's sort of from an attacking perspective, there was lots to be admired, I think.
Yeah, and the left-hand side for me was the big positive, and I think Mikel Merino deserves a lot of praise for his general performance in terms of pulling wide, in particular, on the ball to get Trossard more inside, but also to drag Kamara a bit wider to open up that half space for also Miles to enter as well. And he did that time and time again. And in the build-up to the Martinelli goal as well, it comes from Merino pulling wide, then Trossard coming a little bit more infield and making an excellent run on the shoulder of Kamara. And he was doing that all game. And also, I think, what he did in terms of the aerial duels that we know he's very good at statistically. I thought he was fantastic in that regard yesterday. And the second balls as well. Because Villa in this game, if you look at the way they played last time they came to the Emirates to the way they played this time, it's chalk and cheese in terms of previously they were very much advocates of playing through pressure, looking to break Arsenal's press on the ground. But they were going long a lot. And I think that was more down to Saliba being absent and looking to target Watkins in isolation against a Gabriel, trying to get into those situations as much as possible. But we dealt with it really well. But on the attacking part of the game, is that I feel with our attackers, they've got a lot of stick in recent games, rightly so. There's been so many situations that have been messed up, from Kai in particular. But I can't look at our attackers too much from yesterday. You know, I thought they had a really good performance, all three of them. You know, there's still things that they can do better at. I think you tweeted about Kai in terms of when he receives, sometimes he does slow the game down. And I completely get that. But I think, on a whole, I think they did their job on Saturday.
Yeah.
And there are some negatives. I do want to look at our off-the-ball approach as well, but I think the attacking approach and some of the things I saw for the left-hand side, I'd say that was our most fluid left-hand side performance, barring maybe Brentford's second half and the Leicester game as well. Yeah. And that comes from Mikel Merino. Now, Mikel Merino may not be everyone's cup of tea. Certain things he does frustrates me for sure, but this is a guy that does need continuity in terms of selection and minutes. And you can see the upside when he does have a good game, the effect it has on the left-hand side dynamics. And all of those games that I've mentioned have came from Mikel Merino playing left central midfield, you know, so... Yeah.
I think with Mourinho, a lot of it is aesthetics. I think he's extremely functional. I can't actually fault him from a lot of what he's doing, apart from on the goal from Tielemans. But if you actually look at the outcome of what he's doing, a lot of the time he's doing exactly his job. It's just aesthetics. He just doesn't look particularly pretty while he's doing it. I think that affects a lot of it. George, I thought there was some other brilliant performances, and you can kind of, I guess, take your pick. I thought Miles again was superb. I thought Rice, in terms of his running and his off-the-ball running especially, was again terrific. He's improved so much in higher positions, and so drifting over to the right I think is really nice for him. I thought Gabriel was an absolute monster. He looked like the leader in that back line without Saliba, and that's a credit to him. So yeah, some really great performances, and also Martinelli. You know, he's had his issues this season, but in terms of showing that instinct to get in front of his man and finish that goal, I thought he had a few nice moments certainly as well.
Yeah, I'll just praise the team for its central access, something that I think everybody's talked about as being a big problem, and that comes from drawing people out of position. When you're compact and through the center and you add bodies, one way is you've got to get these bodies out of there. That's just the simple fact of how you create this access. And when you're talking about Mikel Merino going touchline and you know why that open space, because Kamara is forced to go outside of his pivot. He's supposed to follow that run. He has to, otherwise if he doesn't, the fullback has a choice between him and Trossard. And so there's an overload there. So he goes out of position. And then it asks Miles to step up with some technical quality to take the space that was left by Merino and to actually be a threat on the ball, not just be a body that's replaced that space, but be threatening on the ball, which he was. Then we had people doing some quicker switches out wide a lot more effectively. The whole first goal happens because of that exact sequence. You've got Mikel Merino occupying a wide space with Trossard, your more favorite attacker that you want on the ball inside. You want that danger man inside because he's more dangerous. And then we have a quick switch. Another thing that I thought was, okay, Thomas Partey really annoyed me on the night. I don't want to get into that defense league, but...
Oh, we will.
We will.
But
we will.
That ball over the top, the clipped ball over the top in behind the fullback was on every single time. And Martinelli, I felt we left a couple goals out there from that exact play. Yeah. The Liverpool assist that Ben White's able to do. To get onto that man, Ben White, I feel, my God, there's so many things that he, for me, solves that people, we see it in moments, like we see it when Mikel Merino goes wide. We see it in moments where we look at Odegaard and we feel that he's not maximizing his role as best as we can. And we see Yuri Timber, who I think is a brilliant player. It has nothing to do with fitness and being bad on his feet. It's about profile and looking at creating space. And if we don't have enough people that are able to create a threat wide, then everybody in the middle of the park from an opposition point feels comfortable staying there. If we don't have wide threat and people don't fear the wide threat, then they can stay in their blocks, they can stay in their block, and it's easy to defend. You know, and I feel that in this match, yes, we've got Rice, who's been a really good importance about operating on good height, carrying the ball, dropping one of his best 6 performances of the season. That helps when you have good players playing well. But I think, seriously, for me, if we've got consistent threats wide that teams fear, then our game model, which, by the way, is built through wide creation, will work. When you have wide creation models and you don't have the threat out wide, then there's an issue. Some people listening to this podcast is, why do we have to constantly dominate for 90 minutes and go wide in order to create the goals? And some of them will say, do we have the players to receive in the block? Is that why we don't do those things? Well, for me, I look at the opposition because I think they tell you more about your deficiencies than your own team does. And for me, I've not seen people double up on our wide players in quite a while. I've seen the most stress from a Villa perspective in the first half, in which Kamara and Onana were all over the shop, and that came from midfielders going wide and having our attackers more inside. It didn't come from a Kai Havertz or Martin Odegaard dropping in the middle of the park and threatening people. It came from thrust out wide, early switches, and it came from quick decision making. And it came from getting our most dangerous players in the final third more time on the ball. And I think we do that more often. We're going to be a more threatening team. And that's where I'm at with it.
One of my frustrations just off the back of that with this is there's a kind of growing thing with Arteta, which I maybe want to discuss on here, which is him never putting players in positions where they're uncomfortable. And we sort of discussed this on the instant reaction. Rohan, you just mentioned that. There's moments in the game where, for example, with Kai, I'm screaming for him to make that centre forward run. I know he doesn't love it. I know he wants to drop to feet. I know that's not his qualities. I know. But there's moments in a game where you need to make that run. And someone like a Ben White, you lose that out of the squad. You lose that overlap on the right hand side, and it feels like Mikel just goes, "Well, I'm just not going to have that then. I'm not going to stress any because no one else is absolutely perfect. Because Partey isn't perfect at it. Because Timber isn't perfect at it. Because Odegaard isn't perfect at it. In which case, I'm just not going to have it." And it's one of my frustrations, and I think that can contribute to some issues.
And that kind of goes us to the Thomas Partey right back thing, really. And in terms of things he could, But I found this very interesting, and people frustrated with Thomas Partey at right back. But this was very much a game of pick your poison. Yeah. There were no good solutions there available to us.
No, there were. Jorginho against Morgan Rogers. You got to remember that would have been a brilliant one, Rohan.
Of course, yes. But I think if we just and this is kind of like this could sound very condescending, but you just look at the players that we have in our squad, right? William Saliba in his absence, a Ben White, a Tomiyasu. Those would be two players who would come in if Saliba is not available. Both of them are out. You then have Ricardo Calafiori, who, for me, I believe there is potential to be a Saliba backup in that role. I'm a firm believer. Right back. But right centre back as well. I firmly believe he has potential there. He's out injured, so then you've got Jakub Kiwior, who is not comfortable, in my opinion, at right centre back, and he's had some poor performances there. And I'll get into the other things as to the cons there with him. You have to pick between, whether you're moving Timber central or Timber wide. You put Timber wide and you have a Kiwior. I can tell you now, Kiwior would not have been able to do the performance that Timber did and the number of responsibilities that he had in that game. Aston Villa, I'm not getting too tactical, but I think it is important. The way they build up, it is very easy to understand because we have seen it time and time again. This is how Unai Emery's team set up. They're very good at breaking through centrally, and I think statistically, in terms of central progression, they're right up there in the league as one of the best in that regard. And when you look at the players that they have, it makes sense. They build up with this 2-4-4 shape, excluding Emi Martinez, and the fullbacks are playing quite low. And the reason why they do that is to kind of entice jumps. And Martinelli, in this game, is kind of different to the previous game that we had against Aston Villa, where last season, where Martin Odegaard, we know he leads the press. He starts from the central midfielder and then he jumps to the left centre back. But we didn't do that in this game, and we did the same against at Villa Park as well, in which we kept our two number 8s on their pivot, and we asked Martinelli to jump towards Mings, but also to try and cover Maatsen as well, or Digne, if you can. If you can't, then that's the trigger for Thomas Partey to jump. And we did this really well. But what that meant is that Jurrien Timber would have to come really far up the pitch to track Ramsey, and then also understand through reading the body orientation and the positioning of Aston Villa players of when they're going to go long, which was very frequent, When they went long to isolate Gabriel and Watkins 1v1, Timber had to swiftly recover to support him. That's a lot of intensity, and that is something Jakob Kivior wouldn't have been able to do. Now, if you play a Jakob Kivior, the positive is obviously Timber is at right back, and you're going to be able to maintain certain dynamics. But the consequence of a Kivior there is a massive no-no. Whereas a Timber, he can do things that in Saliba's absence in terms of the intensity, but also the angles in possession are a lot more favourable. The downside is obviously Thomas Partey massively impacts the right-hand side. And I know that was kind of digressing, but now I'm bringing it back to your point about a Ben White, for example. Ben White, what he does for this team on the overlap and the runs that he makes, it has a huge effect on Martin Odegaard's performance in particular, because Martin Odegaard needs runners. Now Thomas Partey, every single game he's played at right back, it's not his fault in that sense, but in possession in the final third, he gives us nothing. He doesn't give us the quality. The proof is there in the pudding. If you look at previous games, look at Fulham, look at Liverpool's one, which Bukayo Saka is on an island on his own, creating without a lot of support. But Arteta won't get Thomas Partey to do what Ben White does because he believes he can't do it. But that has a bad effect on the flow through the right-hand side. But that was the ploy. That was the best available option in that game. I don't think anyone would have wanted Jakob Kivior to play this game, and I'm pretty sure that this game could have gone horribly wrong if he was in that game. And that wouldn't be his fault. It's a very difficult game to do what Timber did. But I think there's a lot of context there.
He couldn't have gone hunting in that way. And it's a classic after the fact. Well, we should have played Kivior. Zero. I'm telling you, if you can prove to me that you wanted Kivior...
Prove it.
Well, exactly. But if you're watching, you're like, oh no, I always wanted Kivior. If you can prove that to me, I will send you £50 on PayPal. No one wanted Kivior to play.
Do you know what it is, Alex? Just really quickly as well. When Kivior played against Manchester United as well in the league, right? He had a pretty good performance. But if you look at the way that we pressed in that game, it wasn't aggressive because Declan Rice was deeper to support Kivior, and he wasn't as aggressive when he was playing higher up in that role. But it was also Zinchenko's inclusion there as well. So you could play a Kivior in that game, but I can guarantee you the intensity that we played in that game yesterday against Villa would not have happened. And I really want to stress this point that was one of Arsenal's best pressing performances this season. But it obviously doesn't mean much when you don't win the game of football.
What's it mean?
So, yeah.
Who cares, you nerds?
You nerds, dweebs.
You dweebs, yeah. It was. Yeah, I don't want to lock you out the party right back conversation, George, unless you have nothing to say. But I just think it's probably my fifth choice there. Honestly, it's like I would play Timber there, I'd play White there, I'd play Tommy there, I'd probably play Calafiori there first. Actually, I might even, if we're not playing Aston Villa in a different sort of game, if you're playing a bottom of the league, I might even play Rice there. Honestly, he might be my sixth choice there at this point. And I'm looking at the bench yesterday, and Villa. I think we said this in interaction, but Villa have got Bailey and Buendia and Duran and Marlon, and we've got Maldini, Kakuri, who I'm sure is a lovely guy, but can't play top level yet.
Look, my only thing, and I did say this before the game in group chats, is considering Rice being there and what that meant in terms of what you lost in midfield and going all in on essentially having a passing midfield with runners in the forward line and isolating to make sure that Rice in that position would leave us strong and allow Timber up the pitch. But again, it's a faulty solution, just as much as Partey at right back is a faulty solution, and just as much as Kivior is a faulty solution. And I don't think mine was necessarily better, quote unquote. The only thing is I look at Thomas Partey right now and I think there's no legs there. Period. We can play in DM, we can play at right back. There's going to be moments that we're going to find him dropping into the back line, not meeting up markers. We're going to find moments, when he loses the goal. For me, that's not a right back position. That's you being lazy and marking, mate. And, people are saying the excuse that he jumps with the back line. No. Please don't do that, because the basics of defending, in which you're going to jump with your defensive team, is to make sure you're goal side behind, and that when you do jump, you're meeting your marker. You don't jump when your marker is level with you, jumping to leave him behind. You jump forward to get him offside. He started level, jumped after that, and jumped without looking behind him once. So he had no idea. He didn't do it because it was some big ploy to catch on an offside trap. That's not what he did. And so I'm left there, and I'm annoyed. I'm struggling. I think, by the way, Mikel has asked for a Saliba backup since last year, when he put Rice back in the defensive line last year. Something that we've looked at, but unfortunately injuries have meant that we haven't been able to kind of address that. And of course, Tomiyasu doesn't help us. And that's why I do look at Ben White, guys, and I think this team misses him a lot more than people are willing to admit. I think people were a lot earlier about the Timber shouts at right back. I think Ben White, when he comes back, he will show you a level, not just out of possession, because people know the running power. I really think in possession, there's a level of control that Ben White gives you, particularly with that Liverpool assist that very few of our fullbacks do consistently enough. The clipped ball over the top of a fullback. That's, Jurrien Timber will carry, Jurrien Timber will receive and drive on an underlap, but he will not do the clipped ball over the top with any consistency.
Yeah.
And Ben offers that.
And just really quickly on that as well, it's kind of like we saw what Ben White did in that Liverpool game, coming in at centre-back. And if you have short-term memories, go back and watch the 21-22 season of Ben White and Gabriel as a partnership. Phenomenal. Barring the last couple of months in which Ben White then sustained an injury and he was playing through injury. It's not just about right back. And the thing with Ben White and Timber, it's so good to have those two options because their best qualities are completely different to each other. Completely different. If you want a lockdown defender, you have got a Jurrien Timber there who gives you consistent reliability, and we have seen that every single game this season, barring a couple against Anthony Gordon, for example. Whereas Ben White, he gives you so much more quality on the overlap than a Timber. Timber gives more quality on the inside. And George makes a very good point about that clip ball over the top. I've said this before. Timber's passing gets much better and much more aggressive and brave the higher he goes up. When he's deep, sometimes I get really frustrated with the ball over the top is there, it's available. You don't choose it. And I know I'm kind of talking a lot here, but going back on the Thomas Partey thing, this isn't the first time we've seen Thomas Partey make mistakes in box situations. Even at his best, Senesi, Bournemouth, 22-23, from a corner, scores. Thomas Partey loses his man. Last season, don't know if you remember it, Romero, in the game at White Hart Lane, Thomas Partey loses him. Romero hits the bar. This season, twice poor clearances when crosses are coming into the box. Gabriel is forced to make last-ditch challenges. Really good challenges. This season, Virgil van Dijk, corner. This season, against Atalanta, penalty conceded. This season, yesterday, against Aston Villa. This is just off the top of my head. It's not an agenda against Thomas Partey. And what I will say, Thomas Partey did a lot of good things in the press yesterday. Fantastic in terms of the jumps and the way that he was able to, allowing us to kind of keep them penned in and forcing those long balls, which we did well with, particularly with Gabriel. But this is not something new, and I've been saying it time and time again. And also sinking into the back line when he is in midfield. Neto goal, Chelsea. It's on Thomas Partey to push out. People say that's Declan Rice's role. It's not Declan Rice's role. Once Thomas Partey pushes out, Declan Rice can then get goal side to his man that Thomas Partey was on in that moment. Against Spurs, we saw it as well when he's sinking too far in and Gabriel is visibly frustrated with him. These are mistakes that are just not good enough. And yesterday it cost us. It cost us, and that's what's frustrating because we played so well. We were 2-0 up and Villa had 2 10-minute spells in the entire game. Mm-hmm. And the second 10-minute spell came from a really poor mistake from Mikel Merino as well, which he had a fantastic game, but he can't let Tielemans get goal side of him. If it's someone imposing, I can completely get that. If it was an Amadou Onana crashing the box, you could understand that. You can't let a Tielemans get in front of you, especially when you know he is your man and you've got time to track him. And then Thomas Partey for the second goal. And this is something that's happened a lot this season. Like, in a 10-minute spell, we've had some really poor individual defending. We saw it against Leicester. We've seen it again yesterday as well. That's what's really frustrating for me.
I cannot wait to see the back of him. Cannot wait. We've discussed quite a lot in terms of the dynamics of the right hand side and on the tactical side of the game. Just want to look at the stats because we actually didn't get to them yesterday on the instant reaction, George. We forgot the field tilt. How could we? Obviously 2-2, 1.5 expected goals there, 0.6, but then 65% possession. over double the passes completed, 84% field tilt to their 15.8, over quadruple their final third entries, over quadruple their expected threat created, over triple their deep touches, double their zone 14 touches, and on and on, quadruple their progressive passes, etc. This is not a bad team. It really isn't. It really isn't. By every which way you swing it, we are the better team. Two things, I suppose, and I'll come to you, George. Obviously, this is kind of slightly the story of our season in terms of just loads of dominance and another game where it doesn't quite pay off. But secondly, are we concerned by 12 points dropped from winning positions at this point? Because it's not even just the fact that we're pressing teams in and we can't quite make that advantage made. Mm-hmm. When we do get the advantage, we can't hold on to it. And that's a big concern for me.
That is my biggest frustration that I think Mikel can fix, personally. And look, it's two hands, because you look at those 12 points made, like, honestly, they all come from individual errors that I don't think Mikel says, well done, mate. Like, I'm in agreement for you doing some of these decisions. I mean, he's so defensively strong that I don't think it's a coaching issue. But the one thing that I will say is I don't think that we control game state well enough, broadly speaking. And when it gets to a point in which the game becomes very basketball-y, can we take it away from that? Let's ignore the goals for a moment. Can we, turn the basketball game into an annoying Arsene Wenger against Swansea? 90, minutes of just pure passing. Can we do that when the opposition wants to make it a basketball game? And then vice versa, when you've got a Sporting that want to sit there and don't want to run, can we make them run? Can we change the story of a match when we see it getting away from us? That's something that I don't think we have enough of. And that comes down from personality, a little bit of personality. That's my attempt at an alley, just to get people laughing. But I think it's important because we've got players like Declan Rice that can calm a crowd and can change a crowd. Do we have enough players right now that can change the story of Arsenal's struggles? Not an opponent, but Arsenal struggles. And I don't know, maybe that gets into questions that we've got later on about things in the market and what we can do and what we can do.
Well, the first name that comes up is Zubamendi. And I mean, this is not a game for Jorginho, but these are the sorts of games, as you say. I think it's a really good way of putting it. It's, we have players who threaten the others, but are there players who can change our story? And it does feel, Rohan, that we can't quite impose ourselves on teams. I think it feels a lot like we have all the dominance and the touches and stuff, but we used to be able to almost control the narrative as well of games. It felt like we had them pinned down, not only in a football sense, but also just we know we're better than you, and we're going to hold on to this game, and it doesn't matter, we're going to go behind, we're going to, we score an early goal or whatever it might be, but we have this game under control, and that's partly what we're missing. And look, all of this is in the context and swimming in the pool of the injury conversation and the personnel on the pitch. But yeah, that is a concern for me because it's quite un-Arsenal. Do you know what I mean? Although certainly the one that we're used to, the one that we like anyway.
Yeah, I mean, there's we talk about inevitability a lot, and one of Arsenal's inevitabilities last season, in particular, was when we did go a goal up and we realised we couldn't control the game with the ball. We were willing to suffer, and obviously, as Arsenal fans emotionally invested, you still feel on edge, even though there's a consistent track record of Arsenal getting over the line. But we do it, and we did it time and time again. And if you ask like a neutral fan watching that game, they'll say Arsenal are never in any trouble whatsoever. Whereas this season, it feels like games are still on edge. Like Spurs, for example, we should have walked away with that game with 5 or 6 goals, with more ruthless finishing, ruthless efficiency in box situations. How many times has George said that? How many times have you said that, etc.? How many times have I said that, But I never felt comfortable in that game in the last 10 minutes. I felt this game is still a little bit on edge, But I have a feeling, right, that this is something Mikel banks on, because there's 2 examples that come to my mind. Do you remember West Ham when they scored 2 really quick goals when we were in complete control, and it felt like we weren't in trouble, but it felt like something was not right. And I saw Mikel, the camera pointed to Mikel, and he goes to David Raya and he goes to Gabriel, hit it long, get it long, and we'll look to try and win the second ball because we believe we can control that with our structure that's very consistent. It is not something of we'll play through pressure. we'll look to control the game with the ball. And that is something that I felt Arsenal can do so much better at under Mikel. And I've said this many times in terms of playing through pressure and controlling the game with the ball firmly on the ground. As De Zerbi says, I think sometimes his way of playing has its flaws, but he is very much of the idea that if the ball is on the ground, you control it. You control your destiny. When the ball is in the air, okay, you can implement a structure to control the second ball, but the ball is in the air, so you don't have complete control of it. And that is something I think Arsenal can do better at. And I think this season, when we've looked to suffer as a unit, we've not been as convincing. So that is something I think we can definitely improve on for sure.
Killing games with 1,000 passes. It doesn't feel like we have that, and it kind of comes back to what I think we spoke about on TCP Live recently, like this theory that I have about. I think Mikel went too far on one spectrum in terms of their midfield, filling his midfield with these kind of physical brutes, and you lose a little bit. Of course you do. You lose a little bit of something else, and that's what I think basically we've lost. Probably, sort of rounding out on the game and moving on. Arteta on William Saliba's injury. For sure, we are worried, very worried. We will have more information, another test on him, and we will see. Well, this is a test on my patience.
I don't listen to that guy and his comments on players. I mean, George will know this more than I do.
I would love to just jump in here personally. Can we just stop listening to Mikel for this? Like, I'll be really like, how many more examples do you need of this man continuously embellishing, underselling? It is all, and by the way, weeks of him sending messages to a board of him continuously doing it, putting on Kieran Tierney and Zinchenko at left wing. Like, guys, like there is a reason behind everything he does. If you're telling me, George, you're delusional, yada, 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 no problem. We can address how this team can deal with a William Saliba injury, but it comes down, mate, to the simple fact we need people back that are fit. Like, there's nothing else to deal with if you continuously have Saliba out, and then Ben White out, and then Tomiyasu out, and then, Calafiori out, and then this, and then that. Like, I can give you all the creative solutions you want in the world. Declan Rice down at center back, yada, yada. It boils down to, when you've got that many injured, get them freaking back fit. Cool. Otherwise, you're going to see it struggle. You're going to see the team struggle. And I would let Mikel and the injuries, keep the injury timelines out of your mouth, quote, end quote. And let other people deal with that personally.
I swear down, when I saw that quote on my phone just after the game, I wanted to just throw my phone into the lake or whatever was around. It's like, I don't need this in my life now. His exaggeration.
Just coming at the injury thing from a slightly different angle. Bournemouth, 10 injuries. This is according to premierinjuries.com. Arsenal, 7 injuries. Aston Villa, 4. Brentford, 7. Brighton, 8. Chelsea, 9. Palace, 4. Everton, 6. Fulham, 2. Ipswich, 4. Leicester, 5. Liverpool, 2. Pricks. City, 4. United, 4. Newcastle, 4. Forest, 1. Southampton, 3. Tottenham, 12. West Ham, 5. Wolves, 7. I don't have the numbers, obviously, to compare this to previous seasons, but I feel that there is a wider conversation here that we are not the beneficiaries of. Let's be absolutely clear. I think that the numbers are showing that we are way up there in terms of games missed from our squad. First question, I suppose, is can we do better? A lot of this is public. It's not publicly available information. Someone sent me this thing of like, who was it? What's his name? What's his name? The Liverpool manager, Arne Slot. Is this? It was like something about him testing people's biochemicals and stuff like this, and it was all in the Athletic, and they were saying, but why aren't we doing this? I'm like, well, one, you don't know if we are or we're not, and secondly, if it's in the Athletic, I suspect Arsenal already know about it. There's so little publicly available information. So any kind of can we do better with injuries conversation has to be tempered by that. But secondly, I don't think we can divorce the injury conversation from a wider feeling and I think a wider fact that there is a lot of injuries, a lot of muscular injuries, a lot of overplaying, how much football these guys are playing, the level they're playing at, the level the league is at, which is obviously impacting it as well. George, I'll come back to you on this. yeah, I just think that yes, we can bemoan our injuries and we should talk about that, but there is a wider conversation here too.
I really struggle, and I don't want to be, because I'm from the field, so I understand a little bit more background to it. And honestly, fans just, it's probably one of my biggest frustrations, because I think fans make conclusions on things that they don't understand. And you've just got the section of the injury analysis that really boils down to just get back fit, mate. And, you know, are we sending people out injured? Is it total incompetence that we have such incompetent doctors that have gone through 10 years of medical school that boils down to, yeah, I'm just going to send him out with a broken femur? Something along those lines that a lot of fans just ultimately jump to, that I find really quite insulting and ridiculous, but it's the state of it. You know, when you were quoting those numbers, I would love those numbers to be quoted with the amount of starting 11 players as a percentage, please. You know, you quote Bournemouth, 10 players out, they're missing Evan Nielsen and Sensei, who arguably Dean Hugheson is better than Sensei at and would start ahead of Sensei. But other than that, the rest of their injuries aren't starting 11 injuries. So that's the first thing. So when you quote, and I'm not saying you, by the way, Alex, I'm just saying like the commentary on it, it's a very disingenuous point. Because when you
I
look
mean,
at
who
Arsenal,
it's affecting more is obviously a conversation. But the point I'm making is the volume of injuries just overall.
Yeah, and I'm just talking from an Arsenal perspective, the injury topic there. But then when you're looking at it as a football, but I think it's something that we've heard from the players for how many years, mate? Like, I mean, they're telling you, I'm breaking down. And I mean, we don't care. We say we do. Fans say we do. But then ultimately, when you've got Rodri getting an ACL, and when you've got this, we've got celebrations in terms of us going down to the title. And it's going to take something longer. The players have told everybody this. The coaches, the managers have told this. So I think it should be a football thing. Personally, like there should be a blackout, much in the same way that people want to platform big political topics. We're going to lose players. We're going to ruin players' careers, and we're not going to have Bukayo Saka playing if we continue this.
And this is why I bring this up in this way, because to solve this injury thing isn't going to be done by Arsenal at London Colney. Like it really isn't. Like we have to look out a little bit, and that's why I bring it up.
It's not exclusive to Arsenal, as you've both alluded to. This is a wider problem, and we have seen players come out and say, you know, this is not sustainable. Then you obviously have that side of the camp of, oh, they're paid this much money, etc. Get on with it. They're still human beings, and their bodies are being put through the mill. And just to give you some context, right? Last season in January, do you know how many games we played?
No.
3 games. Played 3 games in January. We have played 6 games in January.
We'll play 9.
And there's 3 still to go. 9 games. Let's look at Kai Havertz, for example. And Kai Havertz has to play because of the injuries that we sustained. Kai Havertz played 90 minutes against Newcastle. 3 days later, played 120 minutes against Manchester United. 3 days later, played 90 minutes against Spurs. 3 days later, plays 90 minutes against Villa. You can do that for a lot of players in our squad. Why? Because it goes back to the injury thing, where these guys need to play because we do not have other players there to play. It's quite simple. And I don't get how people can't see that. And it goes back to that no excuses thing, right? If Arsenal were 5th, 6th in the table and not playing well, I think that there would be cause for concern even with the injuries that we have sustained. But Arsenal aren't 5th or 6th. They're 2nd in the table. And they're still doing decently relative to Liverpool. Obviously, the gap is big, but they're still there and thereabouts. There are absolutely excuses there for Arsenal not to be sustaining a title challenge with what we have seen this season. Go and look at the teams that have sustained more injuries to us this season and look at where they are. As much as we want to banter Spurs, right? Spurs have been decimated with injuries this season. Absolutely decimated. Look where they are. Aston Villa, in their defence as well, they've had really bad luck with injuries this season so far as well. But look at where they are. You know, the teams that have sustained these injuries, they are feeling it with the results. And that's what I'm saying. This is not exclusive to Arsenal. This is a wider problem. But when you look specifically at Arsenal and just look at the comparison between January games this year and last year, it's too
crazy.
much. It's too much, man.
And just to return to the point that George was making earlier about, you know, sort of first teamers, I think, again, I would say it's difficult to call it an injury crisis. I mean, it depends how you want to define it. But I think the crisis, to me, is defined by the inconsistency. We just never had the whole team. When we come to review this season, we're not going to know what to say because we've never seen the team. It's never been. We've never seen the idea for more than 2 games. It's unbelievable. But yeah, I think in terms of who's been unavailable for Arsenal, there's definitely a conversation there. But also the teams who do have their first team out are struggling. You look at Spurs, you look at, obviously, Man City had a couple of injuries and it completely threw them. Liverpool that season where Virgil falls over and everything. And, I think people say is always such a vague phrase, but there are those people who say, yeah, there's no excuse for injuries. Every single team, I don't care who you are, if you lose proper first team quality, you're stable, you will fall back. It happens to everyone at every point. It's not an Arsenal thing. So yeah, the injuries conversation is going to carry on, but I think I suppose to conclude this is just, I would encourage people to look out as well and just be like, there's a wider conversation here, and I hope something changes soon because it's getting ridiculous. Let's come to questions from you lovely listeners. If you'd like to get involved in our Discord, you can become a Patreon member on, guess where? Patreon, or YouTube member by clicking join if you're watching us on YouTube. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple, you can just go onto Patreon or YouTube and join from there. And yeah, you get access to our Discord, which we'll come to now. Also, yeah, go on.
Yeah. From Franco, SKR. Has the signing of Kai Havertz set Arteta and the club back? Be honest. Word for word.
No. The wages of Kai Havertz may be a problem. Yeah. But the Kai Havertz profile is needed. When I'm looking at who we're competing with, I'm looking at Man City, who are just dropping another £200 million like that on players when they're having a problem. If we want to compete at the very top level, we're going to have to get used to paying big money for players and actually them not even necessarily becoming properly, stable. Let's say the stable is up for debate at the minute, but probably Saliba, Saka, Rice, Raya, and maybe half an Odegaard. I think those players, you take a gamble on a young Saliba and he becomes that. Saka comes out of your academy. You can't always predict where it comes from, but we're going to have to get used to spending big money on players like Kai Havertz who can play in a number of positions brilliantly, who are fit, who even if you don't see him as the long-term solution at centre forward, which I'm beginning not to, or certainly we need a different skill set there. Even if you don't see that, Kai Havertz is going to be an unbelievable member of the squad that is more than vital, and he'll play games. So this idea that we've been set back, it's only if they've bought him, we're not moving on from him, and that's it. But then would that be Kai Havertz's fault, or would that be the fault of people further up?
It's really annoying because as a transfer fee, categorically not. He's paid it in spades.
Yeah.
But what do the wages? But what do the wages imply?
Yeah.
Right. That's the trouble. So then if I'm being really honest, do I believe Arsenal in 3 years have Kai Havertz as a starting categorical starter? I'm lying if I personally ever believed that. And ironically, the one time Arsenal broke wage structure logic was for Kai Havertz. And do I believe that was the right choice? No.
Yeah. And that's very interesting because I've always looked at it in which, whatever you think of Kai Havertz and his time at Chelsea and the turbulence that he had to endure, and a lot of those players effectively were not able to fulfill their potential because of the number of managerial changes, the number of player turnovers that they had, chopping and changing there. That led to Kai Havertz not being able to have stability at Chelsea. But when you sign a player, you look at their performances at their previous club, regardless of the context. And that, for me, is where the wages I've always struggled with, because what he did at Chelsea, forget about the concept, did not warrant him to be on that wage. The transfer fee, I'll maintain it. I think he has given Arsenal a lot of really, really good moments. Back end of last season, he was our best attacking performer. And this season, he's still our top goal scorer. Now, he's not perfect. He's had some really poor games. But he's been run to the ground as well. And I find it very difficult to sit here and say, let's say Kai Havertz was a mistake, right? Let's say we go with that viewpoint. But then should Mikel not be able to sign more attackers to rectify that mistake when we've seen Manchester City spend 100 million on Jack Grealish, spend 50 plus million on Mateus Nunes? We've seen Liverpool spend 70 or 80 million on Darwin Nunes. We've seen Chelsea spend bucket loads of money on players that haven't worked. We've seen Man United spend bucket loads of money on players that haven't worked. The point is that one signing, in which was a big signing, if it's deemed a mistake from people, why should the manager not be able to rectify that and look to spend more in that area?
Yeah, no, he absolutely should, and that's why I don't think it would be fair to say Kai has set the club back. We're not Brentford. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you're Brentford and you pay £65 million and you're paying that kind of wages, that you better get that right. Yeah. But we're Arsenal. I think also the financial people that I'm aware of always talking sort of cost per annum. I think when you look at the price amortized over the contract plus the wages, etc., in terms of, Havertz is a bit high, but when you look around at the people we're trying to compete with, you see how many people they have who aren't playing, who are on pretty similar cost per annum because of the wages and because of the fee, whatever it's worked. I think that I will never mind saying Arsenal have made a mistake. I really won't mind that, but I'll always look around and say, but are other clubs making the same mistakes? And if they are, then maybe that's just part of the sport. It's not just Arsenal are horrible and have made an error. And as you say, Rohan, I don't think we should. I think it would be unfair to not allow Mikel to
the mistake
forward.
for me was making Kai Havertz your risk. Personally,
I don't think he was particularly.
But his wages imply that they were, because that was reckless from an Arsenal perspective to make him your highest wage earner at the time. And even still, I don't believe Martin Odegaard is ahead. I believe he still is Arsenal's highest wage earner.
He is, yeah.
So
I think it's reckless if you're not going to go and you're not going to continue to sign players at that level, which I hope we do.
So my only issue, and I have to be fair, I can't, in good conscience, if I don't believe you have the potential to in 5 years, 3 years, 2 years be a starter for Arsenal, and then say you're going to be the highest wage earner. Like, it's a big statement by a club. That was the mistake for me. I think Kai Havertz was somebody that you absolutely can take a chance on. It shouldn't have been highest wage earner level chance. It should have been, I'll give you competitive wages, but if you didn't want to come, then I'm not going to make you the best. I'll give you an A-. I'll give you 80% of our top wages, but the best, off the back of what you did, that for me is a mistake. Does that mean then you're not allowed to rectify it? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So that was my issue with the Kai Havertz signing in general. But I just don't believe that making a mistake like that on a wage means that you're hamstrung and never giving wages and giving one in, one out, and all of the other extremes that people want to do.
We're not Brentford.
That's what I don't understand. I will never understand it.
Yeah. Question from Alejandro AFC, who says, to cope or not to cope? That is the question, but for real, the window is halfway closed and we haven't done any offensive signings for the injuries we have now and for the future of the offensive line. What should we expect if nothing happens? And I had a theory last night, which I can't remember if I said in the instant reaction, but I certainly haven't said to you, Rohan. Is there a world, as he tries to understand why nothing's happened, is there a world where the Cronkies are looking at this season basically as this? January 23, we were surprised by the fact that we're in a title race. And we signed 3 support players in Jorginho, Trossard and Kivior, none of which were, because we had Thomas Partey, we had Saka and Martinelli, we had Saliba and Gabriel. So none of them were going straight in the team. There were support players and they went, well, look, we need these support players. We're probably going to do these in the summer, but actually if we're on the way now, we may as well do them. Is there a world where the Cronkies are looking at the injury situation with Saliba, with Saka, with Ødegaard, with how far we are behind, even if it would make George cry, they're saying, look, we need to go and do the next level of attacking signing. And even though we could go and do a Semenyo or whatever, I'd rather do it in the summer because frankly, this season's kind of over. Is there a world where they feel that?
I kind of sat in the minority camp in the summer in terms of I understood to a certain extent, the logic that was there in terms of why Arsenal didn't spend big and why, if you look at their net spend, it was very healthy because of obviously over previous years, Arsenal had to spend a lot of money to get to the position that they're in. And because we didn't have assets, we didn't have players on contracts that were healthy that allowed us to sell them for good money. It meant that we had to invest in our squad for many years. So I understood the summer. But right now in January, I think it would be gross negligence not to do anything. Especially when you consider the turnover of our front line, the potential turnover of our front line in the summer. We could be looking at 3 potential attacking signings we need.
Yeah.
Like, even if it's just one, surely one signing cannot hamper what we might do in the summer. And especially as George alludes to, there's still a lot of the season to play for. I don't believe Arsenal will win the title. I felt that when Saka went down. And I've said that many times. I'm a very optimistic and confident person in my team's abilities, but that really hit me. But there's still a chance. There's still a chance, and you can still do something. What's to say, right? Let's say the window closed, and Virgil van Dijk tore his ACL, and Salah tore his ACL.
If there is a God. I'm not wishing injuries. No, I'm not wishing injuries. Not wishing.
But
imagine,
right? Imagine these things can happen in football. We've just spoke about how this is not exclusive to Arsenal in terms of the injuries, right? This is a wider footballing problem. How poor would that be, right? The window closes and we do nothing, and something happens at Liverpool in which they lose key players, and we're stuck with the players that we have. The lack of players. For me, it would be gross negligence, especially when you consider the fact that there are a lot of players with uncertain futures coming into the summer across the front line. And there are players available there, as George will know way more than me in terms of across Europe, players out there who can have an impact now and can have an impact in future seasons as well. So, yeah.
At the expense of not rehashing my entire rant from the instant reaction, I'm going to keep it short and sweet. I believe fans are well within their right to question the ambition of the club if we don't invest this winter. And it has everything to do with investment into the project, and it has nothing to do with trophies for me. It has everything to do with proving that if you're not going to invest now, when? At what point? Arsenal are the most successful they've been sporting-wise. They're the most healthiest they've been financially. If you're not going to release the funds at that point in time, I don't see when the logic would be to release them. And I categorically do not buy, that there's no one that can help a situation, and you not putting yourself in the best position to help yourself is the definition of failure and what leads to apathy. My friend is going to continuously make the same damn mistake. I'll always be there for you, mate. But, at the end of the day, if you want to keep putting the self-destruct button, that's on you. And I can't do much more than that. And, yeah, I think it is category, and in a world of very few black and whites, I cannot be more clear than this. If we do not see investment, there's completely valid reason that fans should be absolutely irate and believe that the owners have shown a complete lack of ambition and trust and faith in the project. And I would lose quite a bit of my own faith in them.
And it will be such a disappointment because they've been so good since 2018, since they've gained full ownership. It will be so disappointing. Yep. And just look at this team. It's on its knees. It's on its knees. And we've got a game on Wednesday. Then we've got another game on Saturday. And then we've got another game on the Wednesday. And another game on the Saturday. Kai Havertz has been run into the ground. Mars Lewis-Skelly soon could potentially be run into the ground. More injuries will come. They need help. It's not only the case of a player coming in who could give an impact. Imagine a player coming in who could ease the burden that is placed on some of these players' shoulders to give them a bit of rest, so then they can go again as well. I don't get it. It's actually
retweet.
Sensei, can I just be clear? That theory about the cronkies, I don't want that to happen because I know someone's going to go, bloody Alex. Yep. Sensei AFC on X. Is it a testament to Mikel as a coach that he's kept us as high up in the table with the giant and ever-growing injury list? I will say this. If we win this league after this season, I won't swear, but you know what I want to say. Chris Kavanagh, that absolute, you know what, didn't send off Boubacar Kamara for the a worse example of the same thing in the same situation in the same stadium. After, actually no, the Saliba one was a red card, but the Trossard red card, after the injuries we've had, after the fixture list we've had, after the Salah going supernova just randomly on one Tuesday. Honestly, it's one of the greatest coaching achievements of all time.
If we win the league, I'll go skinny dipping every single day for at least 20 days.
Oh, mate.
That's all I'm going to say.
I will be
gloating.
Unbearable. I'll be blockable. I'll be blockable. I've already become quite blockable actually recently, but
I think I'd go to Liverpool. I think I'd just stop annoying them on
me and
just
you,
on,
me,
on
us three.
X. We had a little road trip to Liverpool.
Yeah.
And just stand there like this.
Probably get absolutely battered.
What are you doing, lads? Let's do a few more questions. Let's just quick one. And let's make this quick because this could be very long. Your ideal Jan 25 window ins and outs.
Kieran Tierney out with Zinchenko out. And I would like one of Brian Mbeumo or Semenyo in, and depending on which one, you then do another loan for the opposite wing. Whether that's Adeyemi or Kingsley Coman. And depending on which, whether you're getting the left winger as a permanent or the loan, you just have to make sure it's on opposite wings, but I think we need two. We need 2 for, and that's my ideal.
I'll
go with that as well. I don't know.
Final one from SJB
players,
on Discord. Short some players. Has this season really been that bad? Well, it started out as a Doomer podcast, and here we are. United are 13th and Spurs are 15th. I don't think we can use... Can I just say, we're having our struggles, and I'm very concerned that we won't achieve anything this season. But we're not Spurs. Do you know what I mean? And we can always take a bit of joy in that. They are so bad. City are in 4th. We're the best defensive team in the league by XG. Ignoring the historically bad circumstances we've been dealing with, if we finish second and don't win a major trophy, has it really been that bad overall? And can we write the season off and rebuild for next year? Honestly, I know I've been a bit doom with this podcast, but like long term, if I'm zooming out, I'm not that annoyed at the club or the players or the manager particularly. Like I'm annoyed at if we didn't invest in January, we didn't do anything, I'd be really angry. But like long term, I'd be like, well, based on this season, if our luck kept going in the same way it did, and I felt we kept trying to win games, and it just wasn't happening for us because it's just one of those seasons, I don't know how angry I could get. I'm doomer about this season, and I'm like, I just feel like it's not our year. But I honestly buy that sentiment. I really do.
Not to say like I'm throwing it on the fence, but ask me in literally 2.5 weeks. I really feel that a lot about how I feel long term can be defined, as I said from the previous question, what the owners feel and ambition. I'm fine with the team in the short term. I'm actually probably more optimistic than anyone you've ever met on the playing pitch and the side about it. But as far as things go in terms of long term and medium term and how I feel about chances and how much trust I have in people outside Mikel Arteta and the players and stuff on the pitch, that's something I'm fully grappling with. And so I need some answers about that, especially under the context of what we did this summer, a profit-making summer.
Yeah.
And this January, knowing what we know about our accounts that are publicly available knowledge, I have to be fair. Just ask me in a couple weeks, and I will be able to give you a very clear. I never hide from black and white where I see.
Do you remember when I made a joke at the beginning of the window that if we do a release clause on deadline day, I'll do something. I don't know.
Joan Garcia, release clause on Joan Garcia, and that's it.
What would be even worse would be doing the Nico Williams release clause on deadline day. That would be even worse. I mean, obviously you're buzzing, but I would be furious.
Fuming.
It's like, what are you waiting for?
Rohan, your final thoughts on that? Because this is the thing, I can't. The reason I'm upset, and when I'm critiquing Mikel, I'm critiquing like the final slither of bits that I think he might not get right. It's such a small aspect. I'm looking at all one aspect of our play. Is it the turnovers, or is it maybe, is it a little bit of box? These are actually, yes, okay, they have massive implications, but in terms of what he does in his job, and then the players, mostly I think they're brilliant. I mean, I really can't get that angry. I'm more angry at the situation.
I'm not angry at our players. I'm not even angry at Mikel, even though, as George alluded to, he has done things this season that have been questionable, but the driver has been the turbulence that we have endured outside of our control. And that is where I stand. Our cup performances can be better. It absolutely can be better. But for me, in terms of questioning the project, questioning the methodology, I can't look at cup performances as a way of labeling a manager and painting the story. And that's where I stand. I'm a lot more patient than other fans in that sense. Trust me, I want to win every single time I go. I want it so badly. But I've always been someone who is willing to give time to something that I believe in. And as in that question mentioned, the metrics and how Arsenal are doing really good in this metric, in this metric, in this metric. And it goes back to the game model. Goes back to what I believe in that I back this game model. There are things we can do better, but I back it, and I think this game model can become even better if we invest in some quality. In quality forwards. Semenyo, you watch Semenyo against Newcastle. Do you not think Arsenal immediately will be better in transition with a Semenyo?
No.
Forget about the thing, we spoke about things we can do better, right? But just put Semenyo in our team, right? And we do exactly the same thing in terms of the press and then what follows afterwards. Granted, we could still do things a little bit better, but Semenyo would improve it because of the quality.
There's no players out there, mate. You keep forgetting this. There's no one out there. We'll finish there. I'm going to end with some gloating. November 2023.
Oh, God.
At AM on Football. Now we watch as Ange's nice guy act falls apart. Football, Eddie Ditch. And if you're watching the latest interview, you'll know exactly what I'm referring to. What a prick. And I told you all from the start.
You've been on his case from day one.
I've been on his case. George, am I wrong?
No,
you recorded me enough? I've been on this man's case from day dot, and I knew it. He's a prick. I'm telling you. He's a prick. Right, we'll leave it there. At least Spurs are rubbish. Thank you, boys.
Thank you, good sir.
Nice one.
Oh, that's good. That's nice. Rohan, your little sign-off can be nice one. George's is thank you, good sir. Yours is a nice one. I like that. Thank you for watching. As I said, if you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you subscribe and all that good stuff. We'll be back with Scouted tomorrow, aren't we? I think we're going to do a here's what you could have won in the summer, kind of Scouted. So that'll be fun. Rohan and I will be back for TCB Live, and Rohan's got a data pod coming next week with other George. And yeah, the content machine keeps rolling. Thank you, boys. Thanks for watching, and thanks for keeping it Arsenal. Come on.